What's good, Zelda fans? I'm D-Rock. I hope your day is going smoothly so far. In this video, I'm going to be going over some potential new juicy information for the sequel to Breath of the Wild. I'm going to be upfront with you, this leak is more than likely false, but man, it is sure interesting, and I think it's worth exploring and sharing with you. So I have to give credit where credit is due, right? This potential leak for Breath of the Wild 2 comes from the user 4chan, and I'm not sure how credible the user is, but even if this guy is wrong, it's still a very nice list of things that I personally, as a fan of the series, would love to see implemented in the sequel. I like to break each of these potential elements down one by one and sort of give my honest opinion on them. Don't forget to drop your opinion in the comments below. Let's get into this. So the user starts out by saying that the reason Link does not have the Master Sword at the beginning of the trailer is that after the events of Breath of the Wild and everything that transpired, Link returns the sword to the Korok Forest, which is now floating in the sky. I mean, this would make sense, right? It could surely explain why Link is Master Swordless in the trailers that we have seen up to this point, right? Let's continue. He then goes on to talk about the game's difficulty and that it's roughly the same, meaning we shouldn't really expect an increase in difficulty. So I have something to note here. My question is, bro, did you actually play the original? Because I don't know about you, but Breath of the Wild was like the hardest Zelda game I have ever played, especially at the beginning of the game in Master Mode. Like, that was ridiculous. Now that being said, I am totally okay with the difficulty staying the way it is. I would definitely love to have Master Mode return because it definitely does give the game replay value, for sure. This one is huge, and if it's legit, Breath of the Wild 2 will easily win Game of the Year, whatever year that may be, 2023. 4chan goes on to say that Breath of the Wild 2 will return to a more traditional dungeon style, as well as giving the player a replacement for shrines, which are even older ruins located throughout Hyrule. This, to me, and in my opinion, is one of the biggest reasons why Breath of the Wild wasn't the best entry. They took away one of the biggest things that made Zelda, the dungeons. They tried to make up for that in the Divine Beast, I guess, but that just didn't do the dungeons of old justice. Again, that is just my opinion. I mean, what's better? The Divine Beast from Breath of the Wild, or getting that beautiful panoramic shot as soon as you walk into the Forest Temple, which gives you a look at just how majestic and creepy this dungeon is going to be to explore. 4chan also suggests that the intro of the game is set up pretty much as the original was, but it's way more dramatic. Now that's interesting. That is a bit vague, isn't it? I mean, the beginning of Breath of the Wild is one of the most memorable parts of the game, and to me, it's going to be really hard to beat that. I remember the beginning like it was yesterday, man. Link waking up in the Shrine of Resurrection, Zelda speaking directly to Link. Again, that beautiful pan out shot we get as Link sees the vast area of Hyrule, and everything we see, we can legit explore. It was such a beautiful moment for the Zelda series. I sure hope Breath of the Wild 2 can match the feeling the original gave us. But according to 4chan, they're going to do that, so I guess we'll see. Moving on, and this is something that was all but confirmed from the trailers for Breath of the Wild 2, but 4chan goes on to say that the sequel will roughly have the same enemies with slight, quote, evolutions to the ones we know and love. He also states that the music in the game is pretty much the same as the original, that being simple, mellow, and giving more of that, quote, empty vibe that the original Breath of the Wild gave off. I'm totally okay with this approach. However, I do have one caveat here that I'd like to touch on. I would love to see some enemies of old in the sequel, and I've made a couple of videos on this before. Iron Knuckles, Nintendo needs to bring these guys back. Dark Nuts as well. Ugh, man. You remember in Twilight Princess as you're scaling Hyrule Castle, and towards the end you have to fight like 3 Dark Nuts at one time? I think that's right. Maybe 2? Anyway, point being, the adrenaline rush I felt fighting those classic Zelda enemies, I'd sure love to witness that again in Breath of the Wild's graphics. Man, oh man, what a moment that would be, right? New underground enemies that have the ability to manipulate time. This is another leak from 4chan. What? I sure hope this is true. I mean, why is Link the only one who can manipulate time? Can you imagine like a Stalfos, for example, being able to cast some sort of magic that freezes Link? Enough said there. Can you say overpowered? 4chan reports in this leak also that the weapons have the same durability mechanics that the first game did. However, the difference here is that some of the new enemies have a time reversal mechanic that ends up healing the weapon. each and every time you strike the enemy. Well, that sort of fixes the issue I had with durability in the original. Well, sort of. Hey, this is a great idea and something I never thought of potentially being a mechanic in the sequel. The balance here is what I really love. If this leak is accurate, I love how durability would be still a thing in the sequel, but if you find a weapon that you like really dig, there's a way to sort of salvage it without worrying about it breaking or finding a replacement. Man, that was such a drag in the original. Here's also something that was sort of confirmed in the trailers that we've seen. 4chan mentions that the plot of the game revolves around time manipulation and also another dimension. All of these potential leaks are getting me so fired up for what's potentially going to happen in the sequel. We did get to see Link sort of manipulating time in the most recent trailer that Nintendo dropped, where he was sort of, or at least it looks like he stops the iron ball and then shoots it back at the enemy that was in that specific clip. And I'll do my best to show some B-roll here on screen of what I'm referring to. Some of the best titles in the Legend of Zelda franchise involve time in some way. Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, come on Breath of the Wild 2, let us mess with time once again, please. Now according to this leak, the green arm that each of us have been theorizing about is all linked to the Triforce of Courage, and that the arm power that Link wields in the sequel is from a sage that goes unnamed, that gives you new mechanics throughout the game. This is insane, man. His arm being linked to the Triforce of Courage is a brilliant idea, and it definitely explains why his arm is green amongst all the other colors it could potentially be, right? It also links the original Breath of the Wild and the sequel back to its origins, with a lot of the story having to do with the Triforce itself. I feel like, in my opinion, that was missing, and it was lacking in the original. Very curious to see if this is actually a thing. This one, my friend, this one right here, if this plays a role in the sequel to Breath of the Wild, wow. This leak suggests that Zelda, yes, Zelda herself, will be playable. You heard me right. 4chan reports that Zelda plays a role in the character swap mechanic. She's in another dimension, and you have to switch characters for puzzles to influence the regular Hyrule overworld and vice versa. Lots of teamwork between Link and Zelda. This gives me Dream Drop Distance vibes for all of my Kingdom Hearts fans out there. If you know, you know. It'd be so cool. This is what we want, right? I know because you mention it in my comments very frequently, which I love, by the way. One of the things we the fans want most is 1, an alternate dimension like in A Link to the Past, and 2, having Zelda as a playable character. My friend, the hype is real, and I am dying to know what your opinion is on this one for sure. He then goes on to say that Zelda has the Sheikah Slate in the sequel, as she is playable, like we just talked about, with no real combat for her from what was played, mostly stealth and puzzle solving for Zelda. No gear, inventory is just materials and quests. I'm totally cool with this if this leak does turn out to be true. I would love to have Link have only certain things he can do, and the same with Zelda. It's about time both of these characters get their own individual moments in the spotlight, right? Come on now. This next one from 4chan is really an addition to the last one that we discussed, in that Link will only be using powers from his arm that he attains from the new Sage, while Zelda continues to only use the Sheikah Slate, much like she did in Age of Calamity. So does this mean that the Master Sword is not going to be used like at all in the game? Very interesting. He then goes on to say that the sequel to Breath of the Wild has a lot of Ocarina of Time references. I mean, you sold me there. It's one of my favorites. If none of these leaks come to life and this one does, I'll be a happy camper for sure. This one is juicy, my friend. Make sure you lean in on this one. Are you listening? The identity of the sage should satisfy you. Yes, that is the quote we get. That's it. I have my theories here, and I think I'm going to save that for a future video. Man, the possibilities here. A surrealist tone is what we should expect in the sequel according to 4chan. I wonder what this even means. If it has anything to do with releasing the creative potential of an unconscious mind, well, I guess you could say I'm intrigued, to say the least. I just can't help but think, is this going to be the Zelda game that takes the throne as the best Zelda game? This leak then goes on to suggest that the sequel will, quote, kill the past, end quote, story about champions taking place as the new sages and have a more traditional Link, Ganon, and Zelda plotline. I did like the direction Nintendo was going with this narrative, however, I do like the idea that there could potentially be some more traditional themes in the sequel. There's nothing wrong with that, man. Nothing wrong at all. I gotta be honest here, I think this one takes the icing on the cake. Pretty sure I butchered that, but 4chan does suggest that there will be a total of 6 dungeons in the sequel to Breath of the Wild. Holy crap. I mean, I would have been fine with 4, but 6? I mean, I'm totally not complaining here, but my lord, I wonder how big the dungeons will be. What will the themes be? Again, the possibilities are endless. This also further supports my theory of the game not releasing until March of 2023 on the new Switch model. They're just adding so much, and they will need the extra time in my opinion, which by the way, I'm totally cool with. Out of everything on this leak list, I think that this is the one without a shadow of a doubt is accurate, and that's that the sequel will take place immediately after the first Breath of the Wild. I don't want to spend too much time here, but it's nice to know that we will have another direct sequel in the Legend of Zelda series. It's amazing. So this one's pretty cool. When 4chan was asked if he's seen Ganon at all, his response was, and I quote, "Never saw Ganon, but from what he saw, he can understand that the undead form of Ganon is invincible, and Link and Zelda have to work to restore Ganon's physical prime form to be able to injure him," end quote. This is another theory that I've heard a decent amount throughout the community. This is another thing that I would totally be fine with as well, as far as being a true leak from the sequel to Breath of the Wild. You remember that guy with the pink headband in Breath of the Wild that helps Link build his house? Yeah, that annoying cutscene that you can't skip. Yeah, well, according to 4chan, he's dead in the sequel, I guess. Not only that, the man from the realm of the dead will give Link hints throughout the game, much like Cass did in the original. Now tell me that doesn't fit the narrative of this game being darker than Majora's Mask. I absolutely love this. 4chan was then asked to list 3 things that weren't in the trailer. These were his responses. 1, there's land mola that are like the size of 2 horses that burrow between sky islands. 2, double sword weapons. And 3, a power that both slows time and speeds up Link. So in the sequel, well, first I'd like to ask, what the heck is a land mola? And why are they the size of 2 horses that burrow between the sky islands? I'm so curious now, it's not even funny. Yeah, it's very odd. And the whole double sword weapon thing, I like this a lot. Really interested to see how far Nintendo takes the different weapons narrative for sure. I'm assuming the latter part of his quote is linked to his arm and the power of the Triforce of Courage that this unknown sage gives Link at some point in the story. Anyway, I'll leave this linked information in the description below if you're interested in dissecting it yourself, because I'm sure you are. I was. Hey, do me a favor, and if this is the first time you are hearing my voice and you found some sort of value here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell to turn on notifications for more Zelda content. I will also ask that in order to continue our Breath of the Wild 2 conversation that you click on the screen here. It'll bring you to a playlist all about the sequel and what I'd like to see in the game. I appreciate your time more than you will ever know. I'm D-Rock. Much peace and love. Be the light.